Hello, friends and folks, and welcome back to Neutral Game, your newbie-friendly fighting game podcast. I am Six Detmar from Scanline Media.
And I am Real Soviet Bear. Hello.
And we're here to talk this week about months. I always do that. This month, we're here to talk about a special type of fighting game, which is versus puzzle games. And specifically, we're going to talk about a couple examples because it's a pretty big genre. I know, as far as versus puzzle games, like what ones have you played over time? What ones have made a mark on you?
Well, mostly the one we're going to talk about today, but aside from those, I played a bunch of Puyo Puyo and Puyo Tetris, even though I'm not particularly good at either of them. And I guess, playing versus Tetris sometimes in Dr. Mario.
Mm-hmm. You spent much time with Super Puzzle Fighter?
No, I have actually never played Super Puzzle Fighter.
Oh, yeah, it follows a lot of these similar tenets of the games we're going to be talking about, though of course it's mechanically a little different. But, these games are all sort of a kin. They all have that, matching colors or lines or whatever mechanic, one-on-one. And I think it's really interesting how they can feel very distinct despite being so similar. I feel like across the whole suite of versus puzzle games, they're generally more similar than most fighting games are to each other, but they also feel very distinct. Like they definitely have their own feels,
I think it's easy to say that if you're into fighting games, but I think that people who, for example, aren't into fighting games but are into versus puzzle games, they'd say the exact same. Oh yeah, versus puzzle games are very distinct once you get into it, but fighting games all kind of feel the same. Unless they're really 2D or 3D is the only distinction a lot of people make. But I think the layman won't really be able to tell you the difference between, say, BlazBlue and Guilty Gear or King of Fighters and Street Fighter.
I suppose that's fair, but so the two games we're going to be talking about this month, we're going to be talking about Magical Drop 3, one of the games in the Magical Drop series, and Money Puzzle Exchanger or Money Idol Exchanger, depending on your region. And those two games are, there are definitely differences, and we'll talk about them, but they're so similar, more than I feel like most examples across fighting game series.
Yeah, definitely.
So as far as Magical Drop 3, this was the first time I had ever played any of the Magical Drop games. So I understand you have a little bit more history with the series than I.
Yeah, I don't actually remember how I came across it. I think it was just when I was in an emulation binge in elementary school. And eventually I just came across Magical Drop on the MAME emulator and played a bunch of it. And ever since then, I've been playing it kind of on and off. I've gotten a bit more into it last year because it came out from the Switch, so I played it quite often on the commute. But I haven't had too much versus experience playing it.
So, was Magical Drop 3 the first one you played?
Yes, I did try the other ones. I tried 2 and 1. They are very much inferior. 1 is basically going from Street Fighter 2 to Street Fighter 1. That's how different they are. And then I haven't played Magical Drop 4, but I played Magical Drop 5. But Magical Drop 5 was developed by an indie studio that got the license because so the game was made by Data East in the 90s, and Magical Drop 3 was specifically 97, but because Data East went bankrupt, the IPs they had were basically up for grabs, and you can kind of license them out very cheaply now. So somebody attempted to make Magical Drop 5, but it wasn't really that good. So 3 is kind of the go-to for people.
So, okay, as far as mechanics, you said 1 to 2 was a pretty big change, so I think probably going over what changed there would take a little bit too much time. But as far as 2 to 3, what really changed that made 3 sort of the game?
I think the flow is much better, and I think they made the characters much more distinct. So the character choice matters a bit more in how blocks are pushed in. And in general, I just think it's like much more polished. Like I'd say it's something like, funnily enough, it's something like the Street Fighter 3 series, compared to 2. It's just like it's much smoother and much more approachable in many ways.
All right. So both of these games are sort of the both Magical Drop and Money Puzzle Exchanger are of the style of puzzle games where sort of blocks or tiles or whatever the case may be are advancing on you from the top of the screen, pushing down, and you are trying to make combos to keep it from reaching the bottom. As far as that goes, within that basic rule set, how does Magical Drop 3 work?
So essentially, in Magical Drop 3, you have several colors. I believe it's like 4 colors, and what you do is you control a little jester at the bottom of the screen, and that jester basically takes a stack of the same color from above him vertically, and he can carry any stack of any size as long as it's the same color. So, for example, if you don't have anything in your hands and you pick up a blue piece, you can pick up as many blue pieces as you want. And if there are several blue pieces connected in one go when you pick them up, he picks them up all. So basically, you're kind of just stacking the same color, and then you throw it. Then you move around left and right, and then throw it in a straight line all at once. And how it works is when you throw the pieces, if they make a 3, like a connect 3 in a vertical line, then at least like a 3, then they vanish. But also, any piece of the same color that they are touching, as long as it's not diagonally, so if it's like, next to it, like left, right, or further down, that also vanishes. And then that causes a chain reaction where all the pieces, like gravity pulls them upwards. So if those pieces that move make a new connect 3, then that also vanishes. And then you can kind of just keep chaining that. And while you're doing this, you don't really wait for a combo to resolve. It's not really like, say, like Puyo Puyo, where you make a match and you just wait for everything to fall down. You still have control, so you can make new matches in parallel while other matches are still being resolved. And that's how you also combo. So like you can combo either by actually making a chain reaction or just matching extremely fast.
And that's one of those dynamics for both of these games that I found, like, when I first started getting into Money Puzzle Exchanger, is, like, it's really essential to getting good, but it also, I feel like, feels kind of counterintuitive, because just the game feel, like, the visual and sound effects associated with combos are really satisfying, and it just feels instinctive to sort of sit back and watch your work. Like, if you set up a good combo, sit back and watch it unfold, but you cannot do that. You have to keep attacking.
Yeah, it's a very aggressive game. Rounds go lightning fast, as you saw when we played, actually. But you can like lose whether you're a player or you're playing against CPU. Like a round can last 3 or 4 seconds. Like it can go that like fast. Like if you're very unlucky. But kind of another way to win is if both players are going really fast, because essentially what happens is if I make enough combos, I will send more pieces on your end and they will push your board downwards. But before my combo is resolved, you can start counter matching and kind of negate that combo and push stuff towards me instead. So to kind of prevent this endless race in Magical Drop, what they do is they have a quota. So if you manage to remove 150 pieces first, you win.
Yeah, it's interesting. I found it. The second game we're going to talk to doesn't have anything like this, and I found it a really interesting distinction where, like, especially when I was starting to get used to, like, once I started to get a handle on Magical Drop, there'd be games that would, like, rounds that would end, and I would be surprised that they had ended, right? It'd be like, what? No, I'm fine. It's like, oh, quota, right. And I think it's a good system, for sure, but it also feels it can make some of the endings feel a little abrupt sometimes.
Yeah, it feels like like a timer, but because the game moves so fast, it's not really like a fighting game timer where you can, timer scam, or like you can notice it and then counterplay it. It's more just like, no, this person is just playing like faster and matching faster than you. So it's just you have to like stay up to speed.
I would almost consider it something like a gear check at a certain point. Like once you get to the point where you can successfully hold someone off, it's like, no, like, as you say, like to prevent a stalemate, it's just sort of like, no, we're going to reward the person who's better at matching more faster, even if they can't overwhelm you. It's just like, this is a second way that they're going to win, just because we have to have a winner, and we're going to sort of punish you for not being fast enough.
Yeah, and I also wonder how much of that was like, through playtesting, they saw that there was a lot of very long matches, and like this game is extremely hectic. Like, I'll be honest, if you had that speed for 5 minutes straight without a breather, I think most people would just be way too overloaded from it. But also, it's an arcade game, so most arcade games have some sort of timer to prevent people from camping the machine.
Sure. So one of the things that kind of, and again, this is true for both of the games we're going to talk about, but one of the things that kind of bothered me, especially I guess in Magical Drop, just because I wasn't as used to Magical Drop, was so the rule is, as you say, you have a line of 3 vertically, and that will trigger a combo that'll trigger a clear. But in both of these games, there's sort of this idea of like motion is the spark, right? Like if you have the board and there is a line of 3 vertically, there's a line of 5 vertically, it won't trigger on its own. You have to add to it or move something near it for it to trigger. It will not on its own start to combo. And combine that with the fact that it's 3 vertically only. You can have like 7 horizontally and it won't do anything. And I found it took me quite a few number of games to get a sense for, just like an intuitive sense for when something would trigger, because I felt like I would set up combos and then they wouldn't combo.
Yeah, I think part of that is due to the low number of colors that they have. So when the board is pushing new pieces towards you, it's very likely that it'll push 4 in the same vertical row. So what the game expects you to do in that case is like do a freebie match, because like let's say you have like 4 blues on the board that like haven't triggered, they just spawn that way. You can literally just press the pull button, pull that stack, and immediately shoot it back, and then it will match. So it's kind of like a very quick match you can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but of course, like when it's buried or something, that can be kind of frustrating to get. Part of me like ended up wanting something like an extra button that was just sort of like a detonate button, basically, which is like if there's a combo on the field that is not triggering, I could press a button to make it happen. But I'm sure that would generate a lot of other problems in the gameplay. I'm not a game designer. To me, it felt kind of frustrating sometimes.
I mean, I'll be honest. I often think about what you could add to this game to make it more interesting, and in general, like a super meter is like not the worst idea. Like having something like a character special that just says, you detonate a section or you freeze the opponent's section or something like that. I think, was it called Tetris Attack Gaiden or something like that?
Tetris Battle Gaiden, yeah.
Tetris Battle Gaiden. I think that one had supers, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it had different levels of super, and yeah.
Yeah, and like something like that is not really, that outlandish. So I can definitely see feeling like the game could use something else, because as it is like a very distilled experience.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that was frustrating to me is so the characters do have different like push patterns, which is an idea I was familiar with because of Super Puzzle Fighter. But in Super Puzzle Fighter, when you select the character, it shows you like, okay, this is their push pattern, and in a Magical Drop, there's no indication of what their push pattern is.
Yeah, it's that's an issue I have with the game as well. I think the 5th game actually does show you how they push, because it is very specific lanes that they push. I am not 100% sure if the color is specific that they push, but I know some of them also don't push as far, but they will push frozen pieces towards you. So it'll kind of like require more for you to match them.
Yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, and there is like I know there's some like there are those pieces that like have a delay around them, right? Like they have a bubble where for one turn they won't do anything, and the next turn they turn into normal pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's an interesting idea because like on its face you're like, well, that's just extra powerful. You can just clutter someone's space up with junk. But that also lends to much bigger combos because you can sort of bury them, and then when they trigger, there's sort of a cascading effect. So I think that's a really interesting choice.
Yeah, no, definitely this feels in a lot of ways like a fighting game, and like some of the characters are straight up better than others because like they push more aggressively, or they just are genuinely focused more. It seems the ones that have a very wide spread of junk are actually the least effective. But it would be interesting if somebody you like took this with fighting game sensibilities and seeing how they would actually go about balancing the characters.
Yeah. And just as far as aesthetics, one thing that took me a little bit to catch on to, but then I realized was actually kind of clever. So the characters are all representatives of Major Arcana from Tarot, and then you've got this clown who's like you're like who you're controlling and is dropping things down. And for a while, I was like, "What? Why is this clown here?" And I was like, "Oh, the Fool Arcana. Okay, I get it." I'm embarrassed at how long that one took me.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't help that there is actually a fool as a playable character as well.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm taking their credit away.
Yeah. No, I think that Jester is a carryover from the previous games. I can't remember right off the bat. But yeah, all the characters are based on Major Arcana, and starting with the third game, they got extremely fan servicey in a lot of the designs.
Yeah, there's some. I think the world is just like a naked lady with her breast covered up by a floating cloth, and then there's a lot of jiggle when she's excited.
Yeah,
okay.
She is the mascot of the series. She was very much more, not much more, but she was more toned down in I think the first and second game. But then, like in the third game, they just said, "Ah, the hell with it."
I mean,
One also thing I could recommend, by the way, for as far as the characters goes, if you want to play this game, I recommend the Japanese version simply because each character is voiced, whereas in the U.S. or Western version, they have female voice actor and male voice actor, and then they just assign them to all the characters.
All right, well, there's a clear recommendation there, and it's just like obviously you should be playing the Japanese version of Windjammers. It's a proud tradition of Data East Games to have the Japanese version be the better version because you want BU. He's the best.
Exactly.
All right, well, shall we move on to our second game then? Muddy Puzzle Exchanger?
Yeah, sure. So you're more familiar with this one. I've only really played it in single. Well, that's not exactly true. I found out about this game by playing it in Versus, but then I played single player for an extremely long time, and then I played against you this weekend.
Yeah, so Money Puzzle Exchanger is a very similar style. You're dropping stuff from down below. It is themed around currency exchanging magical girls, which is an interesting choice.
I love it.
So you're picking different characters who have excellently translated names like Every Worker, LD Labor, and Debt Miser. Great names. And their picking them doesn't have, as far as I can tell, any effect on push pattern. I'm pretty sure everyone's identical. But the rules of the game are that it's based on Japanese coins. So there are 1 yen, 5 yen, 10 yen, 50 yen, 100, and 500 yen coins. And so you match them according to value. So you combine 5 ones to get a 5, but you only need 2 5s to make a 10. And through these, you can, 5 10s make a 50, 2 50s make a 100, 5 hundreds make a 500, and then 2 500s combine and they vanish off the board. And I think because, like, there are a few effects of this that I really like. One is that it encourages a kind of precision, because if you can match 7 ones to get a 5, but those other 2 are just wasted. You don't get any real bonus for doing that. So that encourages you to be precise and do the exact amount that you need if you can get away with it. And then also, because it's kind of, it lends it a more dynamic feel, because how much it takes to match something varies based on the currency, and it's only ever 2 or 5. It's not like there's this crazy variance, but if you've got 2 5s, that's really easy to get rid of. And you can set up these really interesting combos that I think are also really easy to read, because the numbers also have different colors, and so I think the board becomes very, very readable.
Yeah, it definitely it definitely feels intimidating when you start off first, because it reminds you of math, or it reminds you of money. So people are like, oh no, I have to manage my finances while playing a video game. The only real struggle I had, but I guess that comes down to getting used to it, was when you chain 5 pieces together, knowing where the new piece would actually end up being, because sometimes I thought I figured out where it would end up, but then I was wrong.
So it spawns wherever you dropped the piece to set off the combo.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have if you have 4 ones stacked horizontally, and then you drop 1 on the end, the one you dropped on the end is where the 5 will spawn. So it is entirely predictable once you get used to it, but yeah, it's an arcade game. They don't really explain that.
Yeah, but it's also when you have the chain reaction and you have combos happening, then it's much harder to keep track, because multiple pieces kind of drop at the same time, and then you have to see, where will this drop, and then will that piece end up where I want it to be. So you can kind of, at least for me, maybe with more practice it'll be different, but maybe I could think of 2 combos ahead, but after that, unless I was parallel comboing, it was all luck.
Oh, I could do, I often didn't do it to you because I didn't have time, because you were dropping smaller combos on me, but I can do a 5 all the way up to 1,000 pretty easily if I've got time. It's not, once you understand and are used to the way in which the matching works, it's no, that's no problem at all. But one of the things I mentioned it with Magical Drop 3, and I will bring it up here again to be fair, is that, again, you do have the issue of, the board will push down 5 100s, and unless you drop something near them, they won't combo on their own. So I'm not just gonna... I like Money Puzzle Exchanger more, but this is a something that I object to that they share. It's not just a Magical Drop thing. So there are also special pieces that will drop. There's Rank Up and Erase, and the way that they work is if you combine 2 Rank Ups or 2 Erases, they will modify the piece directly above them. So if you have 2 Rank Ups on top of a 1, every 1 on the board will become a 5. And they will match based on that. So if you drop 2 Rank Ups on a 1, that 1 becomes a 5, and then all the 5s will of course combine based on that. That counts as a spark to trigger combos. And then Erases will erase all of that given piece. So if you drop 2 Erases on top of a 10, all the 10s on the board will disappear, and then you can trigger combos based on that. It does have some scaling where combos done via Rank Up or Erase don't drop as much on the enemy board as natural combos, because otherwise basically a round would end every time you got one of those combos. But it's a nice way, it's a nice comeback mechanic, I feel like, and a way to swing the board when a match goes too long. But also it can be a little too RNG-y. We had games when we were playing where both of us would go an entire round, a long round, 5 minutes, and neither of us would see a single opportunity to do either a Rank Up or an Erase.
Yeah, I noticed that, and I'm still not really sure whether it's pure RNG or whether it's something else. Because what I did notice while playing, the way they push down patterns seem to be oftentimes pre-designed chunks, if that makes sense. And Magical Drop does this too, where it doesn't actually randomly pick, okay, this lane will have this coin will have this coin, or have some very convoluted calculation. What it actually does is it basically has a handcrafted segment of a coin layout, and then it pushes that downwards. Because after we played for a while, I could actually notice some patterns repeating, like a bit further into the round. So I almost think that that also determines whether you get a like rank up or in a race as well, like which pattern you get.
Interesting. That makes sense.
Um, but yeah, definitely the starting pattern is I think the same for both players, but all the other ones are just random.
So going from, like, now that we've talked about both games, like, I guess, like, comparing and contrasting the two experiences, like, how do you feel about, like, Money Puzzle Exchanger versus Magical Drop?
So to me, it seems like Magical Drop just starts at the highest speed immediately. Like there's no build up to it. There's no, um, there's no like slow build up like in say like Puyo Puyo, or like if you compare it to Magical Drop, like in Magical or Money Puzzle Exchanger, like to that. It's more just you immediately start at the highest speed. You start matching, and it's just like a speed check and how much how much you can actually focus. Because in Magical Drop, one thing I remember telling you was like when you were struggling, I just told you just don't think about a strategy, just match. And that helps a lot because one thing that happened to me a lot when I started playing was I would stop to think, and it took me longer to think than it took me to act. And Magical Drop definitely just favors like reacting and acting more.
Yeah, and like at that point when we were playing, I hadn't won any rounds, and you said that, and I immediately won the next round.
Yeah,
So
it is definitely just a get in the zone type of game. I feel like Money Puzzle Exchanger is much slower paced at the start. Like when you have this kind of like prep phase, it's almost like when you play a real time strategy. Like you kind of just have this. Okay, this is the map. Start building up your strategy. Start building up your funds and all that stuff. But then when one person goes on the aggressive, that's where you just go all in and then start going on the aggressive as well. And like you said, like I did a lot of like slow matches and like kept like bombarding you with like very small amounts of junk. But it's also like it goes the other way around. You can also just make a setup for a very big combo, and then as soon as your opponent triggers their combo, you start triggering yours, and then it goes like the back and forth until one person eventually just doesn't have a match.
yeah, I definitely agree with your assessment that Magical Drop 3 is more of just like an all-out, like, just racing back and forth, like pure like rushdown basically on both sides. Whereas I think Money Puzzle Exchanger has more of an ebb and flow to it. And personally, I mean, like, I think part of what you like is going to be determined by what you played more of first, and I played more Money Puzzle Exchanger first, but I also just really like the pace of Money Puzzle Exchanger. I like the fact that it is not just constantly one tempo, and it's shifting, and there's sort of a build and a release, and I find that really satisfying.
Yeah, Money Puzzle Exchanger definitely has, I think, a more like classic puzzle game pace. I obviously personally prefer Magical Drop because I started up with that one first, but also playing Magical Drop for an extended period of time is extremely stressful. Like when I was at MagFest, like this year, there was a Magical Drop arcade cabinet, and I played against some really good players. One of those players basically said, "This is too stressful. I can't play anymore," and just left. And like they were extremely good. And I in general just I could maybe do like 10 minutes of games and then I was just done. Like I couldn't do it anymore. My heart couldn't handle it.
Yeah, it's very draining.
Yeah. Whereas Money Puzzle Exchanger, I feel like because it has that build up and then it has that one tense like climax where the back and forth starts, then when the new round starts, it's kind of like easing you back in again. So it's much better for extended play sessions.
And I guess it's a pattern across my like of competitive games that it's like I like games that have those quiet moments and stuff. Like I like Dragon Ball FighterZ more than I like Marvel, because while they're very similar, Dragon Ball has built-in moments of quiet, built-in moments of peace, and moments to consider. Or like I like Dota because Dota very much is about the build and then, you know, the climax moment and then, you know, the settling, the falling action. I am not good emotionally or just skill wise at games where it is just on and it never lets go.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see that. It almost feels like every puzzle there's a versus puzzle game for every type of person.
Yeah, for sure.
So how would you compare this to your standard issue versus fighting games? Like, do you think that people who enjoy fighting games could enjoy these types of puzzle games?
I definitely think so, and I definitely I think we just said it, but it's like I think you compare it a lot to how you like playing games. Like I'd like to, for example, I'm going to take my friend Jennifer. My friend Jennifer plays rushdown characters, and when she doesn't play a rushdown character because it's a character she has a particular attachment to, she finds a way to make them a rushdown character. She just rushdown is her thing. And I think to that mindset, Magical Drop 3 is way more natural because it's just this game about relentless pressure and aggression. Whereas Money Puzzle Exchanger, none of these games actually have a true neutral game because it's the concept of interacting with the other person's board is so nebulous and so you have so few ways of interacting. But it has, I feel like, a pace closer to more of a neutral game style. It has more of a building and a positioning. And so I think if you're sort of a person who wants to control space or do setups, I feel like Money Puzzle Exchanger is closer to that style of play. And then there are other puzzle games we can get into, like Puzzle Fighter, which is actually a really good representation of Street Fighter style, and Puyo Puyo, and it just various styles that we'll probably talk about in the future on a future podcast. But so for Money Puzzle Exchanger and for Magical Drop, it's sort of classic neutral game versus rushdown, but if those don't fit you, there are other games out there for you.
Yeah, and I definitely think it's always good to consider these type of games because you can kind of get the same feeling from them you get from fighting games, that same itch, but it's much easier to convince somebody to play, I feel, like your standard issue person, a puzzle game than a fighting game, simply because Tetris is the most popular game in the world, so people will figure out the rules and get into it, and it's very much a time spent playing equals how skillful you end up being type of genre, but with a low barrier to entry.
Did you know that Next Generation magazine said that Magical Drop 1 was as fun and addictive as sex after lunch?
I did not know this.
Which just the way that's written. I don't want to judge about game reviewers and the type of person, but just the way that's written, I don't think that's a thing that person has had.
Yeah, no, I would not describe that game like that, definitely.
But so even if you don't like sex after lunch, I think we would still recommend both of these games. I lean towards Money Puzzle Exchanger. You lean towards Magical Drop, but try them both. See what works for you. Try all these games because, as you say, they're a great way to get people who are a little intimidated by fighting games into games that are basically just fighting games.
Yes. And if you want to know where you can get these games, if you want to play them on a console, you can get both games on the Switch. They're both released as I think there's arcade classics re-releases, and those come with both versions of the game, both Western and Japanese, so you can play however you like. I do not believe they have online play, but if you do want to play online with people, Fightcade is always an option if you're okay with that, because both games are supported on Fightcade, and because Fightcade doesn't have that much latency, it's extremely playable. Probably even more playable than the fighting game because it's, a puzzle game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you're not going to get any one-frame links in Magic. Well, maybe in Magical Drop. Magical Drop can be pretty mean sometimes.
Yeah,
I'm joking.
I've had the rollback netcode mess me up one or two times. But other than that, it's considering I can play with somebody on the other side of the planet, I think it's a pretty fine compromise.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I think that's it for us this month. Megadrog, where can people find you upon the internet?
So you can check me out on twitter.com/mdkii. That's MDK Roman numeral 2. And there you can find a pin with all the other venues of contact. But also, if you watch video game streams, you can find me on twitch.tv/RealSovietBear, where I stream various playthroughs and I let people dress up pixelated bears and put hats on them. And where can people find you, Six?
If you want to find me on the internet, the best place is also twitter.com. That's for Six Detmar, SAXDETTMAR. But if you wanna go the route of like, hey, let's support this idiot, you can go to patreon.com/scanlinemedia and support me and my friend Jennifer and our creative works there, and you will be rewarded for your efforts. I'm not going to give you the full pitch, but check it out.
Well, I'd say that's it. Well, thank you all for listening in, and we will see you next month. Bye.
Peace.